Chief Justice Maria Lourdes P.A. Sereno, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Chief Justice Meets the Press. It's the second time in the last 2 years that we're having this event. Of course, it's also been 2 years since the Chief Justice was appointed to head the Supreme Court and lead the judiciary. This is an opportunity to hear from the Chief Justice on how the judiciary's year has been and where the judiciary is headed in the future. This afternoon, we are joined by a media panel, the members of which I will introduce later. But we want to start our afternoon with a brief statement from the Chief Justice. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Maria Lourdes P.A. Sereno, Chief Justice of the Republic of the Philippines.
Good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for coming and sharing your precious hours in the afternoon with us. This will be the second time that I will be holding a session with the press. And actually, I found last year's session very useful, even for me personally. I hope that we can take this occasion to use these moments for me to be able to share with you a vision of the future in the judiciary that awaits the Filipino public. What is that future that I envision? Not only am I going to give you a state of what is happening right now in the judiciary, I would be even showing you a picture of events and reforms that are going to be launched and are indeed taking place right now, some of them, as early as next month, next quarter, in 2015, and all the way up to when the retirement comes for me. First, I would like to tell you that what we in the judiciary envision for the future is a process where the public sees that continuous trials are being conducted by the courts and will be the norm for the day. Now, what is this continuous trial system? It will be a game changer for the Filipino public. For the longest time, people have always equated justice with justice being delayed. In other words, actions can happen very quickly in the other sectors of government, but they cannot happen fast enough when you are talking about court processes. We are going to change that. Since the 1980s, actually, when Chief Justice Fernand was then the leader of the court, he was already pushing for a continuous trial system. And I know that some of you would already have covered the Supreme Court as a beat at the time. And he was very aggressive and he was very hopeful that finally it can be launched. You know that there has been impetus in major reform programs already, such as the Congress legislation of the Speedy Trial Act, all with the purpose of bringing to the public a sense that you don't necessarily have to wait for decades for a legal dispute to be ended. Unfortunately, this did not take off. But I am going to announce to the Filipino public that we have now 25 volunteer courts in Manila, in Makati, and in Quezon City who will simultaneously start conducting continuous trial in the system. And this will be launched next month, and I hope to see many of you there again. Now, for some of you who are practitioners here, and Dean Santa Maria is one very important figure in the legal landscape right now, you can imagine already how revolutionary the concept of a Philippine court that is conducting trial on a continuous basis can be. In other words, we have drugs cases where the hearings can be conducted on a daily basis. A drug case, the main trial of which can be terminated in as early as a week, and maybe the decision can happen in as early as 6 months to a year. So no longer will you have an accused who has to wait for 4 to 5 years in detention because he cannot afford to post bail, or in some instances, the offense against him is non-bailable. He will then have a chance to immediately have the resolution of his case terminated. if we are successful with this first batch of 25 volunteer courts, we hope to replicate the experience all over the country. And for all these times, they said that it can never be done in the Philippines. But now the judges are telling me that they are just so hopeful because their dreams for a modern and sophisticated, speedy, accessible system is now coming true. That is what I hope that you can share, the dream, one dream I hope you can all share with me about. Now, this will mean that we will no longer be wasting a lot of time in postponements. Unless these are acts of God, we do not allow postponements simply because one lawyer suffers a stomach problem, which is the usual case that you are encountering now. And because our courts are now going electronic, we have the electronic court system. We have many judicial forms that are already in template form that are already uploaded in the system right now. So what you can basically say is that from the moment a case is filed in court and after it has gone through the judicially referred dispute mediation system and it is not mediatable, then a conference will be conducted where all trial dates are agreed upon, all the witnesses are listed, stipulations are clear, and we now have an expected enforceable terminal date for the proceedings to end. This is something that will be quite revolutionary for everyone. And I hope that this will impress on people the fact that to bring this about requires a lot of resource contribution, not only from the judges and the participants themselves, but the national government. If we are going to make this come alive, then the national government must give us the necessary support for this to come about. We have 25 this year who will begin conducting a continuous trial. If we can hit 100 courts by next year, that will already be a fundamental change of the landscape. By the end of 2016, maybe we can have about 500 courts participating in a continuous trial system. If it becomes the norm, then the justice system, specifically court litigation, will no longer be considered as an obstacle to progress, but it will then be considered as a stabilizing force for the country. People will believe that there is a venue, a forum where their grievances can be addressed, and it can be addressed reasonably, fairly, predictably, logically. And it will be responsive to the needs of the time for disputes to come to an end in what some characterize as an overly litigious society. Now, we need, in other words, also to emphasize to people that there are costs to litigation. And if a cost is not sufficiently serious as to make all the parties and their witnesses go through the rigors of a trial, then we need to strengthen alternative dispute resolution as a way by which parties can bring to a more sober assessment of whether the disputes they have with other parties are such that they want to go through a court process. So side by side with strengthening the formal litigation process, we will have strengthening of the alternative dispute resolution system, and that is happening even right now as I speak. Now, let us picture for you, for example, a commercial litigation. Now, many commercial litigations take about 5 to 7 years to resolve at the trial stage. Now, what I envision is, unless the litigation is inherently complex, such as in antitrust cases and class suits where you have hundreds of plaintiffs, then normally it should take no more, even for a commercial dispute, to be resolved within a window of 2 to 3 years. If you can then assure investors that in 2 to 3 years' time, your contractual dispute, your breach of contract problem, can already have a resolution from a trial court, then the investment framework, the investment formula that they are using, will already factor that in. And it will not be considered as too heavy a burden for risk takers to plunge into a business decision. And if we can have the appeals process included, and it will take no more than 5 to 7 years, then that is a major breakthrough already. But we will do our best even to shorten the time because we have to show the people that in the Philippines, our courts are actually responsive and understand even the time-sensitive nature of business transactions, especially for major investment decisions. So that is something that you will see that the court is increasingly taking cognizance of. Now, if we have this proactive approach to court litigation, that can only mean that we are actively seeking the use of electronic platforms so that much of the processes of the work or the work of the court will be done already and prepared through the use of templates, and on the part of the lawyers and the parties, much of the work can also be done through the comfort of the home or home office or the traditional office because we are trying to usher in a period of e-filing. In the Supreme Court, you already have the start of a stage where you can already file pleadings through electronic means. And if we increase the use of that, ensuring only that those litigants who may not have access to electronic means are not unduly deprived of a fair way of also having their plaints heard in court. As long as we can make such programs, such platforms accessible to enough number of people, we will continue to push the boundary of what can be done. The importance of this is not simply on the matter of convenience of the lawyer or the litigant, who does not have to go to physically trudge all the way to Padre Faura to have his pleading filed in the Supreme Court, or to Orosa in the Court of Appeals, or to whichever trial court that the pleading should be filed with. That is not the only point. The point also is we are trying to minimize the carbon footprint that the judicial processes actually impact on the planet. If we can have less traffic being generated because of these court processes, so much the better for us. We have a commitment to serve the public in every way we can. And this commitment includes being sensitive to the problem of traffic congestion, to the problem of environmental degradation, to the cost of time and money and opportunities lost simply because the processes are not made more efficient. Now, we recognize that the world is changing so fast. And the simple back and forth shuttling physically taking place, when technology can do the trick for us, that will be sought to be eliminated. That you can already see that the electronic filing system that we have been generating is already starting to reduce the amount of paper that is being filed in the court. But it also means that because we recognize our responsibility to the nation, to be responsible users of the natural resources of the nation, and not to contribute to the problem, we are also going to have an infrastructure development project that recognizes the effect of climate change. So disaster resilience is important in our infrastructure development programs. We know what happened to our courthouses in Tacloban, where all our court records were inundated. Some were reduced to the consistency of paper mache. So you can just imagine that the reconstitution of all those records are really disastrous to the cause of justice. So what we have to do is to find a way of storing our documents so that they are not lost to the ravages of disasters such as floods, earthquake, and even to a certain extent fire. So technology can help in that regard. We must also start thinking about locating courthouses where they are not most prone to the fact that sea levels are rising, and our major cities together with their most important courthouses, are located in coastal cities. That is a problem that we have to grapple with because we cannot afford the inability to rehabilitate provision of justice to areas that have been struck by disaster. We must be able to show that the courts can bounce back within a reasonable period of time. How to create a plan that will do that is a challenge that we all face. And I think that most LGU planners, most infra planners are also grappling with that same problem. But we are already sensitive to that fact. All in all, also, I am thinking that while you are seeing all of these movements happening, and may I also share with you more details of this in a later part. Let me just recap this, that it cannot succeed. All of these efforts that I've already been talking about cannot succeed unless we are able to set apart a generation of judges, men and women who are committed to living lives of uprightness and excellence. And we are already thinking very seriously on how to capture that quality at the earliest stage possible so that we can set them apart. We can breed them to be immune to societal and political pressures. We are trying to depoliticize the system of appointments and selection and training and assignments as much as possible. Because the idea is that it is up to the judiciary that who must to establish the gold standard for public service. And you cannot have a gold standard upheld unless you first start with the men and the women who will populate the ranks of the judiciary. Now, may I go to what is happening right now on the ground? You know, we met last year when the e-court system was launched in Quezon City. And I would like to tell you that there are now 61 pilot e-courts. From the moment we met in June last year in Quezon City, there are now 61 fully operational pilot e-courts. And additional trial courts are being rolled out right now, also to absorb the kind of electronics system that we have instituted in Quezon City. And these are 129. This is 129, and we hope to finish the program in 2014. In 2015, we hope to be able to roll out a total of 83 e-courts also in Cebu, Davao, and Iloilo. So that by the end of 2015, you will have a total of 273 e-courts who are responsible for about 25% of the total caseload nationwide. If we can have the resources from the national government, we can add to these figures. The problem is that the executive department deleted our requests for funding for additional e-court support from our budget proposal. If we can even hit maybe 40% of e-courts by 2015 or 2016, you can just imagine the impact that this will have. Now, what does the e-court system do? First of all, unlike the traditional way, where you have reports being generated manually because the clerk of court, under the supervision of the judge, will have to go through the case record one by one before a report can be generated. Now, as long as the incidents are entered on a daily basis in the system, reports are already generated automatically. This will do away with a period of 1 month, which is the total amount of time it takes to manually inventory the cases. So we save 1 month of productive time. And then there is a dashboard that the judge himself, and this dashboard is connected to that of the executive judge, where he already has an idea of the ages of the cases that he is handling. So the priorities to him will be quite clear. The dashboard will also tell him how many detention prisoners are still there. So he can seek to focus on the detention prisoners so that we not only solve the problem of congested jails, we are also very cognizant of the liberties of the accused that must be preserved because there is no finding of guilt on him yet. It also increases public access to information. Right now in Quezon City, you just go to a kiosk and you can already know the status of any case. And you just have to know the parties that are involved. You don't even have to know the GR number. And it identifies for you the court where that case is filed. In fact, how many cases a personality has can already be obtained through the e-kiosk of the e-court system. And if we come to a policy decision to even allow that to be accessible from any point, then that is a major access to information gain. Now, it also boasts transparency because the e-court carries with it an automatic raffling system. So the point of the electronic system is to remove human intermediation and the resultant costs that involves and the proneness to corruption that human intermediation involves. Because from the moment that the cases are filed, you now have a random system that is generated electronically that is not controlled by human persons. And because the courts are now, most of the processes for generating reports are now done automatically, then the quality of decision making improves. And because all the e-courts are loaded with judicial templates, the probability of errors in decision making are minimized because there are already tick boxes for the elements of a crime, for example. In fact, the judicial templates that we have right now is not just limited to templates that are useful to the judges. There are also templates that the private lawyers can use, templates that the prosecutors can use. In other words, we are going to share already the collection of forms that have been arrived at by justice. We are going to share that with the rest of the public so that precious time is saved because we don't really always have to reinvent the wheel. When a template is there, there is no crime, there is nothing wrong with using the template if it is useful and available. Now, that can only succeed, of course, when we are trying to push the agenda of reform. If, in the first place, a judge is given a reasonable caseload. Now, you will probably be surprised, but the truth is there are courts in our country which have only about 30 cases apiece. On the other hand, there are courts that I have found that had as many as 4,000 cases. In Quezon City, the highest number of case docket that I found was 2,200 for one drug court, first level trial court. Now, this is an unreasonable caseload, as any human will probably tell you who has worked with cases. We are thinking of bringing it down to a level where judges can look forward to a work-life balance. We thought initially that 500 will do, 300 will do, but now a project that we had launched, which is the Case Carrying Study Project, has found out that the more reasonable figure would be to try to target somewhere between 200 to 300 cases apiece so that we can make alive our idea of having continuous trial and really having efficient and speedy disposition of cases. In order to do that, therefore, you have to target the 175 courts in the country, and we have identified that are most heavily congested. And I had to pick an arbitrary number, and I chose the number 500 because at the time that was a workable target, and we came up with 175 courts that had more than 500 cases. These are our heavily congested courts. We have been deploying massive amounts of human resources as well as cash in order to solve the logistical problems of these courts by assigning lawyers and paralegals and law students to them to first make a very detailed case inventory of all, physical case inventory of all the cases that are with them. Just imagine, for the first time, a court with 2,000 cases has a complete inventory report on all his cases. That has never been done before. Now, not only is it an inventory, there is also a case management plan. So the team of lawyers and paralegals, under the supervision of the judicial staff, judicial supervisors of the Office of the Court Administrator, gives suggestions for the court to either archive, dismiss, expedite proceedings, or even come up with the suggested resolution already of the case. This has resulted in a dramatic improvement in Quezon City, where we launched the Justiciae program. The Justiciae program is again a program funded not by GAA money. We don't have support for judicial reform programs from the GAA money. It is funded by the USAID. So the USAID funds the lawyers who are bound by the confidentiality agreements that we have made them sign together with the paralegals. And many of them come up enough so that they are devoting time and then time to those case inventories and case management proposals. And then you have private courier service being utilized by these courts. Now, these figures point out that from the time we launched it in 2012 until May 2014, it has already resulted into a 28.84% reduction in cases. Now, I don't know of any more dramatic reduction that you can find with such a program. We hope to reduce the numbers further if the implementation suggestions are further carried out by the courts involved. We are now going to roll this out also in Makati, Angeles City, and Davao. Hopefully, we can persuade our development partners, including the European Union, to give more money. And we hope we can also persuade Congress to please give us the reform money we need to push this program further. Just imagine if the most heavily congested city in the country, which is Quezon City, has already experienced this kind of relief. And you can just imagine judges who started with 2,000, I was talking about the drug court, who now has just 900 cases. In a few months, maybe even that drug court can now participate in the continuous trial system. And you must remember that this drug court therefore handles 900 cases, and out of those 900, maybe you have 1, 2, or 3 accused. Assuming that that means a total of about 2,000 persons that are accused, and 80% of them are in detention, you're talking about 1,600 people in detention whose cases can now be attended to speedily because of our laser focus on judicial reform. So it is a menu of solutions that we are not deploying. It's not a single-track solution. Now, we have the problem of jail decongestion. I think some of you were able to join me when I visited some of our jails. And you already know that the proportion of overcrowding is 1:4 in some cities, 1:8 in others. It is as bad as 1:10 in others. And it is true. The rotation system for sleeping on the floor in a detention center is really the norm now. And I've seen this in all the cities I've visited, and nobody denies the severity of this problem. So what we are now doing is we had launched a jail decongestion program by issuing guidelines for decongesting these jails. Now we are going to put further emphasis on what can be done by the judge. First, by prioritizing his bail hearing, allowing more releases, not on the basis of financial capacity to put up bail, but rather on the testimonials given by reputable organizations who can assure the presence of the accused during trial. We are also authorizing the service of subpoena and notices through email and mobile phones, And you, of course, have the e-subpoena system, which is also being deployed in the jail decongestion program. And we are creating Task Force Katarungan at Kalayaan in all courts nationwide, because we want to make sure that the detainees' rights are not unduly neglected. And the detainees' notebook is a record of when that detainee entered the criminal justice system, so that the judge will always be alerted to when he should have been, to when he should actually be released under the computations that are provided by law. Now just imagine if we are able to have this system of guarding detainees' rights done not manually, but electronically nationwide. Then even from Padre Fabro, we can already tell you the number of detainees whose cases are being heard and who are actually nearing the maximum period for the service of their sentence, and whose cases should really be expedited, assuming they are convicted. So we have all of these systems in place. Now, we had already announced last April the e-subpoena system, and I'm happy to report to you that there is a 95% compliance by policemen of the electronic subpoenas that we had sent. It used to be that we were dependent on the Philippine Postal Corporation, but you had the phenomena of court processes being returned to the court only 2 to 3 months after they were sent to the PhilPost for service. Now you don't have that anymore. The judge sends an email to a designated address controlled by the PNP Central Headquarters, together with the same email sent to the local police station where that police is designated. The sending of the email and the acknowledgement of that email by the system, which is automatically generated, is already service of a subpoena. So that if the policeman does not come and the judge deems that there is an unreasonable non-appearance of a key witness, then already the defense lawyer already knows what to do. We guard the rights of the accused so that the accused is not unduly prejudiced simply because key witnesses against him or her have not appeared. And the system is such that because it is received by Central Headquarters, a report is immediately made on whether he has attended the court hearing as required by the subpoena. If he has not, it is automatically alerted to the administrative organization within the PNP, so that the policeman knows that a court process is such a serious process that if he fails to attend, then there can be a possibility of an administrative proceeding being heard against him. Now, the NBI, Bureau of Immigration, are also asking to be included in this system. And we want to expand it, and they have asked to expand it to the e-warrant system. Meaning, the moment an arrest warrant is issued by a court, it is immediately flagged not only to the police, central police system, but also to the NBI and the Bureau of Immigration, so that the escape of an identified suspect is not made easier, because there is a time lag between the issuance of the warrant and receipt by the necessary apprehending authorities. So even that is going to be on the plate. Now, there is a Justice Sector Coordinating Council, which I chair, and I have with me the Secretaries of Justice and Interior and Local Government. And we have already identified a key project to be the so-called Justice Zone. And this will be launched in the last quarter of this year. Now, the Justice Zone identifies geographical areas. We will start with cities, where you have elements of reform in enough numbers that can be coordinated in order that the problems of delay and inefficiencies in the system are minimized, because for the first time, the key actors are talking. You have judges, prosecutors, public attorneys, key members of the police force already talking about schedules being coordinated, about using the same terminology, using the same platform in order to identify evidence, etc. So you don't have the inefficiencies brought about by 4 different sectors talking in 4 different languages. You don't have that. So we are going to maximize efficiencies while being very cognizant of the need to preserve judicial independence at all times. Now, you have already, we have had the EJAW system, the Justice on Wheels program, and where the courts themselves go to the localities and conduct hearings on buses, especially in areas where court facilities are inadequate. And so far, a total of 7,830 inmates have been released through this mobile court system since 2004. We have already also 26,000 officials of barangays who were able to receive information about law, about legal solutions. Now, we also have a judgment day where we call a specific day as a day where simultaneous hearings are conducted, especially of cases that are ripe for adjudication, and for the cities of Manila, City Quezon, City Angeles, Cebu, and Davao for 2013. A total of 553 criminal cases have already been heard, 245 of which were dismissed, and a total of 215 inmates were released. And we also did this in Cavite and in Marikina, and we were also able to release prisoners. Now, one thing I also want the court to, the public to understand is that the court is very sensitive to the fact that for small claims, yung mga collection cases, friends owing money one to the other, and then the friend not being able to make good on the promise to pay. These are actually small civil claims that can be immediately disposed of. We have established a small claims court, and the jurisdiction of these small claim courts is up to 100,000. We're going to push the envelope further, try to find out if we can increase the jurisdiction even to double that amount. You know why this is important is because the evidence is just by affidavit submission. And we have facilities who can that will even help the parties draft the affidavits that they need. Within a period of 6 months, our experience so far is that no later than 6 months, the whole thing is concluded. But we want to up the ante because if we can conclude the submission of the affidavits and the counter affidavits in as little as 1 to 2 months, we can have decision in 1 day. Now, if we can even have a special focus on the situation of OFWs, just imagine, OFWs have usually 2 weeks to 1 month home leaves given them. For them to be able to avail of these processes, we will try to do that. Now, one thing that is happening right now in 2 courts in Quezon City, 2 branches, is we already have automated hearings. The idea of automated hearing is on the day when the hearing is conducted, the order is issued to you minutes after the hearing is conducted on an order. In other words, you have situations where a practitioner will have to go back to his client and say, nag-hearing po kami sa inyong motion na ganito ang tinatawag. And you know what happened is that I will have to receive the ruling of the judge. Maybe we'll have to wait for 1 month for that. The judge issues a ruling 1 week later, and the judge has to mail it, and it goes through the mailing system. Then the mailing system, intermediation of the mailing system already includes another 2 to 3 months delay. Those 2 courts in Quezon City have already done away with that. The moment a motion is heard, then the court immediately issues an order. And the order is typed in by his or her clerk of court because the 2 courts are presided over by a male and a female judge. And that order is immediately edited by the judge on his own laptop, on his own computer, while he is there on the table and the parties are there. And if he's satisfied, then the order to print is given. The parties are there. The order is immediately handed to the counsel. It has already surprised many people. Just imagine, an order is a hearing is resolved right after the hearing is concluded, and the order embodying that resolution is given to the lawyer a few minutes after the order is pronounced in open court. That is quite revolutionary in my mind. Just imagine, for one to experience, pwede pala yun, hindi pala hinihintay na itatay pa, ibubulsa pa sa envelope at i-mail pa ang mga orders. But right now, people, especially judges, can make commonsensical solutions and can really show utmost sensitivity to the fact that many litigations take too much time and therefore are unduly burdensome to the people. Now, this is all backed by a very ambitious enterprise information system program that the court is going to be pursuing over the next few years. As you can see, we have been focusing on game-changing reform programs. Some of them are actually low-lying fruits, like the e-subpoena and the e-warrant system. It is such a common-sense solution to a problem. But the immediate impact of having these common sense solutions already brought to the people and them seeing that come alive is actually very meaningful in my view. Because for the first time, the judiciary has the chance to show that it is after solutions. It is not after unduly burdening the lives of people. In fact, the ideal is to make litigation as less burdensome as we can to people. We know how important it is to allow Filipino lives to be pursued undisrupted by these aggravations. It is bad enough what we are going to go through. The traffic problem, rise in prices, the need to find good jobs, the competition for our place in the sun is very burdensome already. The key then is to make justice seen by the people not as a foe, but as a friend, a guardian of the civil liberties of the people, a system that upholds fair bargains that had been freely agreed upon by two people in business, an avenue where the poor and the dispossessed can actually have their rights vindicated and their freedoms assured by judicial writs. It is important, therefore, to hone in on the message that to invest in the judiciary is not a losing proposition. It can never be a losing proposition. Any money invested in justice, in making the system work, in bringing about judicial reform, is an investment in Filipino lives. It is as important as the other priorities that have already been identified by government, and if I may be allowed to say, even more important than some of them. If we can see the paradigm to be in terms of supporting judicial reform equals upholding the pursuit of Filipinos for economic opportunities, the practice of their liberties, and their ability to lead productive and happy lives, I think you cannot but agree that this is the time when we need to all come together and try to promote and support the justice sector. And therefore, I find these occasions, few as this may be, to be very helpful. And I thank you all for coming here, and rest assured that the pledges that we had made when we first took the mantle of leadership in the court will be pursued relentlessly, day by day, without us missing a step. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Madam Chief Justice. Ngayon mga kaibigan, nais po namin ipakilala mga kasapi ng media na magtatanong kay Chief Justice Sereno. Papakilala ko sila batay dun sa pagkakaayos nila dito sa mesa, sa kaliwa ko at sa kanan ko. Ang unang-una, bilang kinatawan ng Justice and Court Reporters Association or JUCRA, Mr. Mark Meruenas of GMA News Online. Ang pangalawa, bilang kinatawan ng Justice Reporters Organization or Juror, si Ms. Cecil Villarosa ng DZBB. Galing naman sa larangan ng investigative journalism, si Ms. Malu Mangahas, Executive Director ng Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism or PCIJ. Bilang kinatawan ng Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines or FOCAP, Ms. Teresa Serojano na Associated Press. Isang legal analyst at komentarista ng TV5, Radio 5 at nagsusulat din sa Interaksyon at dekano ng Far Eastern University Institute of Law, Dean Mel